Before we get to the questions, I'm going to take 35 seconds to say a couple things. One is happy to be here today. Northern Policy Institute was excited to be a partner with LEPC for the first 18 months of the pilot. We were, as Madge mentioned, the research and data partner. She highlighted some of the positions that we cost-shared, those three engaging researchers that were a fun little pilot project for us and that we're now using as a model to go across the north. She also highlighted some of the projects that we worked with LEPC in terms of helping to design them, and some of the stuff, again, that we're taking across the north in terms of designs, whether it's community counts or the intersensal estimation tool. My God, we got to come up with a better name for that thing. In any event, as Madge said, the way this works is you have to raise your hand, stand up. Aaron will come to you with the microphone. We'd like you to introduce yourself because while many of us know each other, not all of us know everyone. And then ask the question, and then the microphone will be shared here with whoever. So if you want to direct your question, that's fine. If you'd prefer to kind of just ask it generically, Madge will decide who's going to answer it, or I'll randomly select. So does anybody have a question? So right here. Roz always gets the first question. I don't know what that's all about. You're so shy and retiring.
Good morning. I think it's still morning. Rosalind Lockyer from Paros Centre for Women's Enterprise. We work across the north from Manitoba to up to Arnprior, almost to Ottawa, and south to the Muskokas. And we work with women to start and grow their businesses. And of course, businesses are employers. And that's where our focus is. And I know many of you have read recently reports that have come out from Mowat and CD Howe that talks about the increase of precarious employment in our changing employment trends. Also, we see a trend with government towards innovation in the STEM sector and in technology. I would like to ask you, in all your deliberations that you've been having in the province, I would like to ask you where we are talking about gender in this, because women are more likely to be representative in the precarious employment, and they're less likely to be seen within STEM and the technologies and so on. So, given that we already have a 26% gap in female wages compared to their male counterparts, what do you see happening in all of your talking today around gender? Because I'm not hearing it.
Thank you for your question. So I'll maybe kick it at from where I sit in terms of the opportunities I see for that particular discussion, and then perhaps hand it over to either one of you if you wanted to also speak to it. So one of the things I would say we have the opportunity, particularly with the funding streams that we have, I'll call it the Career Ready Fund out of the Career Kickstart, and some of those conversations, and again, we're in the advantage of newness, so to speak, in terms of being able to, so we've heard that before, and it's good to hear it here again, related to the parameters around that funding. And so allowing it to be sensitive or even to be able to have, do we have opportunities to carve out some specific funding for those particular streams? Women, the Indigenous community, the disabled one, the Access Talent Strategy is one initiative that's just come out in that area as well. And so we are looking to work with partners so that comes forward to us. Again, one of the things that the panel highlighted was the important role of groups such as yourself, or intermediaries was a little bit of the category. And so I've certainly been learning a lot from organizations like that in order to help us again, chat with a few people because it's difficult for small business owners or what have you who are to be able to influence government in that way. And so I would say we have some opportunities related to making some of the programs to ensure they're sensitive to that in terms of both asking what our plan is to ask institutions actually to develop some of the plans related to particularly the career readiness, but also with businesses in terms of, and we can put parameters related to the funding to say, okay, so what are your plans related to this particular population? And also learn around what is working already. And so that's where groups such as yourself are able to assist us in terms of putting proposals forward that say, okay, this because it really works out well for us. The other thing that wasn't so much part of the budget, wasn't a prominent part of the budget, but we did secure funding for, this was talked about, a demonstration fund. And so one of the things we are working, our first priority has been the career kickstart funding, but we are excited to get going on that as well to complement the other initiatives that are happening, so we actually enhance and fill gaps rather than duplicate. So we're very sensitive to that, because between the initiatives with the local employment planning councils, ACWI, the normal churn of business, there are a lot of streams of activity, and so we're hoping to, we're taking a look at that right now, that landscape, to see where is it that we can best provide value.
So I come at it probably from the research side in terms of I have had at least 4 concept papers sent to me looking at exactly that. They tend to all come from specific regions, so a workforce board in Sudbury or service providers in Kingston, or that have all encountered it in their very local reality and trying to figure out ways to get support, to look at better or effective practices for meeting the needs of the female clients or population that they're working with. So from the center's perspective, all of these local pieces are phenomenal, the stuff that the local employment councils do, the stuff that the service providers. But if we want to actually learn at it to have a systems level impact, somebody's got to actually roll that all up. And we have to aggregate it in such a way that we can understand it, really look at what's effective and what's working across Ontario, what's needed at local versus provincial, and then get it back out into everybody's hands so that we can really start making a difference. So I've been working across the various concept papers and reaching out more broadly to people. And we should chat a little further about your organization to bring the right partners to the table to look at it from more of a systems perspective and a research project that we can start aggregating that knowledge and then transferring it back out.
And I'll just add from 2 recent examples in my division. So one of them you heard me talk about earlier was the Skilled Advanced Construction Pathway. And a key focus for that pathway is to focus on women, Indigenous clients, and others with barriers to employment, and try to get them into, for example, pre-apprenticeship opportunities, or attract them into trades, because the construction pathway is all about working with the trades. So that's a recent example. I think I had 2, and I've just lost my train of thought, so I'll leave it at the 1 example.
So our next question is at the table behind Ross. Oh, you get out of here, man. You're not allowed to play. Let's go.
Okay, I just wanted to mention as well, Roz, at the local level and at the local employment planning council, I think we've paid a great deal of attention and tried to have broad representation on all of our subject matter working groups and the central planning table. I think we have to become even more mindful that as we restructure or rejig the subject matter working groups, that we're more mindful and we consciously look at having those broader conversations. So we're all supposed to be bringing those individual lens or perspectives to all those tables, but I think we have to start doing it in a broader discussion to ensure that we talk about those particular issues and that. So I think that's an opportunity for our subject matter working groups and the central planning table to look at what have we been missing, and it could, such as that issue. And so we're going to have to start closing some of those loops.
Did you remember your
Thank
second
you.
example? Okay. Okay, so then Charlotte's next, and then John, but we've got she introduced herself to me, and I've forgotten her name.
Hello, everyone. Sorry. My name is Margarita Wilson. I'm currently the summer student at Common Voice Northwest. However, my day job currently is I am at the University of Guelph in computer science. I just finished my first year. And so I'm very recently out of high school. My convocation was a year ago yesterday. So my question is more about the work being done for the youth, and in particular, what sort of work is being done to directly engage with the youth? Are there focus groups in place? Are we getting into the schools and asking what their needs and concerns are? because I feel that, coming from a personal experience, I was very lucky to be able to get into the computer science program because I had the opportunity to take a programming class. For better or for worse, as to the efficacy of the class itself is to be debated among my peers. But are we getting directly into the school? Because a lot of these initiatives I never heard about in high school, even similar programs that were in place then. And are there any plans to talk with students who are just about to start their career pathways about what they need from you?
Okay, thank you. So I'll just touch base on the LEPC perspective. I do know we do have a youth subject matter working group, but as I mentioned in my presentation, primarily it's organizations that work with youth. And so we do have to get much better at engaging the youth. But I know we're also coordinating our group with Common Voice Northwest. And so perhaps that's something that we could do jointly to go into the schools and start some of those discussions. That would be awesome. So I'd love to talk to you after.
Sure, I can speak to a couple of spots that that engagement's happening, and then mention a few others that I don't know a whole lot about, but I know are also happening. So we have been with our partners in education, that Deeper Conversations initiative that they're undertaking. So they've been going and having roundtables, and youth have been involved, the students have been involved in those to talk about what do they need. The conversation was first primarily around OSAP, to bring better awareness around OSAP, to be honest with you. And we were able to leverage that to also have conversations about what information, labor market information, is better for them at that stage and that point in time in terms of their decision-making process and pathways. We also had the opportunity to speak to, there's a student trustee association that we were able to have a session with, as well as on the post-secondary side, the organized groups that are representative of students, so USA and CFS, and as well as the college, and the name is escaping me, and the college students as well, to have those conversations. And the minister does have, as part of her mandate, the creation of a student advisory council. I'm not sure if that's the exact name of it, but so that's something that will be an opportunity as well for another pipeline to ensure that those voices are being heard. And we have heard a lot about awareness and that students just don't know even that that's happening. And so some of the whatever pathway it is, or information, or access to an experiential learning opportunity, and that's some of the things that we're excited to be able to build capacity around, so that the students have better awareness of those opportunities that exist for them.
You guys want any? Okay, so I'm going to jump in since I had a chance. I was actually giving a talk at a high school about something entirely different, and just because I had the slide in my deck, see, decks are useful, I mentioned magnet. She's got an attitude. In any event, I mentioned magnet, and I ended up in that class for another 45 minutes, and the class after that. So the teacher asked me to stay for 2 groups of students to talk to them about magnet, help them set up their profiles, learn about the tool. So when the ministry gets around to launching this new website about LMI, I would strongly suggest that you encourage all of your local partners to get into the classrooms, not wait until they're in college or university, but get into the high school classrooms, show the kids the tool. Because the simple fact is, as the young lady just pointed out, many of them don't know. And they're great resources. They're relatively easy to use. Some of the ministry websites could use a little love and attention. But the fact is that there's an appetite for the information, and let's get it out there. So, Charlotte, I think you were next.
Yes, Charlotte Robinson, President of the Thunder Bay Chamber of Commerce. First, I want to say congrats to Madge, and thank you, ladies, for all being here. I think this is a great opportunity for us to all learn more, so I appreciate that. You both mentioned Aaron and Shelley as sort of kind of footnotes that you were working on an apprenticeship modernization. And I'm wondering if you could give us a little more detail about what does that mean? You talked about 2 stakeholder sessions. You didn't tell us where those were. You didn't tell us how we could get involved. So I'd really like that information. And how does this actually relate back to the OCOT? Because what we always hear when we talk at our various apprenticeships groups is, what is the role of the ministry versus what is the role of the Ontario College of Trades? And so how does this connect back to the Ontario College of Trades? Because we know they just went through about a year and a half ago this whole Tony Dean review about what they were doing. And now you say you're doing a whole review about how apprenticeship works in your front. So just wondering how the two connect and what the actual plan is and how we can all provide our input. And then finally, want to make it clear that in apprenticeship, as in most government programs, one size fits none. And currently, the apprenticeship programs, the way apprenticeship is set up, often doesn't meet the needs of small communities who have one or two employers, and so it's very hard to meet the current ratio systems, the training costs. There's no training available in Northwestern Ontario for many things. So hoping some of those things will also be considered, because it's a real challenge for Northern Ontario, especially Northwestern Ontario, to be able to fully engage in apprenticeship development based on the current model.
Sure, thanks for the question. So I can talk a little bit more about the upcoming sessions, and then I'll hand it over to Shelley to talk about some of the regional engagement. So yeah, the goal is to not, so there have been a lot of reviews, the Dean review, the work with the College of Trades, and so the idea is to not start at ground zero. I think there's been a lot of submissions, advice, and recommendations to government, and so the idea for this next phase of activity is to really try to map out the map of the journey of the apprentice, and then be able to have almost a visual representation of all the different inputs into that, where is the apprentice getting their information, and so that from that better clarify roles and responsibilities around that. So you're not wrong, there is still confusion around the ministry and OCOD as that process is beginning its disentanglement, and so we can all do a better job of all the partners involved in apprenticeship related to that role clarity, so that it works for the apprentice as well as the employers. In chatting with some of the employers, they too are confused about what best to do and how to support and where to get the information, and so there's some real opportunities to do that. So that these upcoming sessions are they're in Toronto, and so right now it's a bit at the first phase, and this is also why we recognize we needed to do regional sessions as well, and so Shelley will speak to that, because we probably weren't going to get everybody that we wanted to, although it wasn't restricted to a Toronto-based discussion. It's just by the nature of the beast, sometimes you only can people can't travel, and so we are quickly going to be getting some information out about the regional, which I'll ask Shelley to speak to. And so really the focus is on that, the journey. And so for phase one and the first discussion and the next discussion is really to take all of those inputs and then come up with an action plan that's going to inform action for the next 3 to 5 years. And so there will be ideally quick wins that everybody can agree on. There will be ones that are probably some more challenging discussions. There will be resource implications for some of these. And so that the idea is to get that mapped out in a way that's somewhat comprehensive, as opposed to piecemeal. So that's the goal, and we're excited about being able to really try to get everybody level set with the same information. So Shelley, did you talk about July? July, yeah. So there's one in June, and then there's a follow up on July of these sessions, and then I'll let you speak to the regional discussions.
Yep. So we're still working on the details for the regional sessions, but we are holding 4. We are looking at holding a session in each region, and the sessions will be actually a duplication, I think, of the session in Toronto, but regionally focused with stakeholders and ministry staff participating together. We have a very tight timeline to nail this down, because we want to have the regional sessions before the follow-up session in July in Toronto, so that we can incorporate what we've learned from the regional sessions. So there's a team back at Toronto, Bay and Wellesley, working out the details. So I anticipate that we'll have that ready to send out very soon. And we'll be looking to make sure that we've got a really good cross-section of stakeholders and our ministry staff able to participate in those sessions.
So mine's not the information session. I've been trying to stay a little bit out of the details of our projects, but it came up and it's relevant, so I'll put it out there. One of the exploration projects lines is actually around shared apprenticeship models, and I think this actually is relevant in the smaller communities. It's an attempt, it's a mechanism that's actually already legislatively permitted. It's there, it's built in, the paperwork's ready to go. It's just not really utilized or known. There's not a big awareness of it. It basically enables a third-party intermediary to serve as the sponsor. And so it allows you to bring a consortium of employers together who can parcel out the pieces they can contribute to, whether it be training hours, scope of work, but different aspects of it, and act collaboratively to address some of the barriers, such as continuity in employment or the employer needing somebody there when they're off on their training or on their classroom training. The Local Employment Planning Council, actually, you saw their report around it from a transportation perspective. I'm sure we'll be talking more with them going forward. But there is an open opportunity out there to actually think about that, what it means for your community, and ideas that you might want to try out. So if you go to the website, under Exploration Projects, Shared Apprenticeship Models, there's more info. The one-pager is on the USB stick. And Crystal Olson, whom I should have introduced way earlier in this point in this day.
Wave, Crystal.
Can you wave, Crystal? Is actually located here in Thunder Bay. So she's our colleague who looks after the Northwest, and she's open and accessible and happy to meet with anybody for more information.
You want a piece of this, Madge? You don't?
No, I'm good.
Yeah.
Thanks, so.
So John is next, and then I've got 3 questions in the queue after that, including one from Frank, which will probably take 25 minutes just to get out. That's your warning.
Thanks very much for the presentations today. My name's John Mason. I work for the Economic Development Commission in Thunder Bay, and specifically on the mining side of life, but in all of Northwest Ontario. And actually, Charlotte set the stage, because 90% of what she said was with the background of what I was going to bring up. But the fact of the matter is, I'm encouraged by the fact Shelley spoke about the regional opportunities for workshops and meetings on apprenticeship modernization. That was the theme I was going to hammer home, which is a very important piece. So I'm just wondering if there is an opportunity for Thunder Bay to be one of those regional sites and be on your calendar. I would argue that an area the size, and just steal one of Charles's lines, much larger than the size of France, can contribute in a regional sense and have folks from a variety of locations in Northwest Ontario be involved with the Thunder Bay workshop. And to me, I think that would, you'd have huge numbers and a good opportunity to get a variety of sectors covered with that particular model or workshop.
Thank you. I appreciate you sharing that. And without committing, there's been some discussion about what makes the most sense in the north in terms of geography, and certainly the advantage of Thunder Bay has been discussed. So stay tuned, and I'll take it away.
Very good. Thanks.
Okay, so I guess Frank is up now. Short.
Thank you. My name is Frank Pulia. I'm a director on the board of the Workforce Planning Board. I'm also a city councilor for the city of Thunder Bay, so I'm wearing 2 hats today. And my question is, before I go to my question, I wanted to thank you for being here today and providing an opportunity to learn more about what our funding agencies and the government is doing in terms of providing the link to the outcomes. So my question is, from the perspective of a city councilor representing the people who ask me questions in terms of employment, unemployment, and participation rates, I noticed in the last few years a major improvement in the way we measure outcomes and the way we are held accountable at the local level to provide results. So, and there has been talk today about evidence-based innovation in workforce, value for money in terms of the Auditor General auditing what we do. So my question is, have we, and I know we have come a long way, but there still seems to be a perception that we're not providing outcomes in terms of, and we're government, right? Government, it's difficult to actually measure what we do. At the end of the day, are we making a difference in the unemployment rate, in the ability for people to get a job, or because the apprenticeship is now much more streamlined? those kind of things. So I'd like to hear from you in terms of how far we have come and how far we need to go to connect the dots. Because at the end of the day, when I'm asked, and I'm wrapping that up with this, my final comments, I'm asked, what do you do on the Workforce Planning Board? And my answer is that we provide valuable information and intelligence to our funding agencies so that we can influence the allocation of resources where they're needed the most to make a difference at the local level. Because at the end of the day, as volunteers, we're going to sit on the board to the extent that we can make a difference and we are relevant to our community. So I know it's maybe a complex question, there's more than one in there, but at the end of the day, how far are we from really focusing on outcomes instead of measuring activities? Because there's a tremendous amount of work going on.
So Tina, do you want to take that first and talk about measuring outcomes, since, you know, a lot of it is research-based? Don't forget to pick up the microphone before you start.
So the challenge with positioning me first and answering it is, and I try really hard to distinguish this, the work that we look at, we will rigorously measure outcomes, and to the extent that we can, meaningful outcomes, not just counting, bums and seats or those types of things. But we're not government. So what we do, while I would love to be able to, for the government or yourselves to be able to point back to and say, we can make this decision because of this information and we know it'll lead to outcomes, at the end of the day, there's a horse to water phenomenon. So I can put it all out there and you guys or the ministry may use it, you may not. That said, I think my colleagues will speak to where the ministry is going with it, and I really hope that as we move towards a more evidence-informed approach, we'll absolutely see more of an outcomes and less of a counting-based approach.
So I will signal, and I think I used an example in my presentation that spoke a little bit about, I think we have more work to be done on outcomes and how we measure outcomes. There is some work underway in our policy division to look at, performance measurement and how we measure the performance. The example I'm referring to is the one I outlined with Youth Job Connection, where, the way the program is designed right now, we have a bit of a difficulty, for our service providers to put that ticky box into the system to say, done, if they have a client that doesn't proceed through all 4 mandatory components of the program. So we're measuring, and I think your question was, where are we going? We have some opportunities I think we need to take advantage of relative to outcomes, and are we even measuring the right things? And if not, what do we need to measure? And at the end of the day, that outcome is associated with a client, a person. So I'm not sure I'm really answering your question, except to say that we will be paying a lot of attention, I think, in the next little while around what we need to do from an outcomes-based perspective.
Maybe just to close that off, although Trina will say she's not government, and I appreciate that, but the work that the center is doing, I think, is really helping because it's helping inform options related to that measurement and the robustness and evidence-based decision-making. There are also some centers of expertise developing in government related to that. There's a center, because this is not just a phenomenon for us, it's across government, and for a Center for Evidence-Based Decision-Making that we're working with as well. And I think we have the opportunity with some of the big programs that have been signaled, Second Career is a good one, for example, to take a hard look at some of those to make sure that we're measuring what matters and then being able to demonstrate tangible results around that. So I think the good part is there's the center, there's these initiatives and the priority and the momentum behind what we're doing. Now we just got to get it right. So and I think that there are some good learnings that we're not starting from scratch, I would say, which is a great thing.
Thank you. And I think one of the opportunities that around measurement and that's provided to the LEPCs and actually the local boards is that not only do we have an opportunity to provide the evidence-based information, but we also can add the qualitative information that we learn from all of our community partners, and so I think that's been one of our strengths all along, is to provide that other side of the hard data, actually qualifying it by what's really happening, what is shown by those numbers, the story behind them, right? So I think that's an opportunity and a role that we can continue to fill.
Qualitative is evidence. Just going to put that one little plug back in there. I think lines of evidence are complementary. But as a workforce board, I would throw a gauntlet back out to you a little bit, in that if you meaningfully want to start thinking about outcomes in a workforce development perspective, my 3-year-old is the workforce in 15 years. So if you want to measure a meaningful outcome, you got to start with her, which means we got to collect data and we have to track and we have to meaningfully look at her pathway through our system, as opposed to just necessarily a program outcome or, you know, the short-term kind of responsive things. So as a workforce board, I think you guys can be leaders in getting into the community and helping change some expectations and drive, you know, up the bar a little bit as to what we actually expect.
So I've got 4 questions in the queue. I'm still okay to go to 12:15, right?
Yes.
Okay. So the next question is here just beside Bart.
Thank you. I'm Sarah Stalker with Contact North, and I'm the e-channel literacy coordinator. And my question comes out of the fact that many of us who work within the Employment Ontario mandate have a business priority to enhance learner pathways across various ministries that are involved in education. And I wonder if it would be possible to hear a little bit more about the perspective of the highly skilled workforce in terms of involving those other ministries, because MASD, as we term you, are very well represented here, and we appreciate that. But we often find in literacy that crossing the, I don't want to say divide, but the lines to enhance learners coming from different pathways, whether it's community sector organizations, college sector, or school board sector, can be very challenging. And then crossing ministries is even more of a mountain, I guess. So any comments on that?
Sure, yeah, I can speak to a bit of that. So the so in some ways, we're just getting going on even, there's a lot of organizations within the literacy and basic skills space alone that have a mandate around planning, and then much less the education sector related to planning. And so part of that is we're working closely in government related to our colleagues in education around making sure that we're aware of each other's, if you will, in terms of the different entities that are doing that planning. And then particularly with literacy and basic skills, what we're hoping to do is springboarding in part off of some of the great information and recommendations around that were in cathexis, that things that are asking us to think thoroughly about some of the initiatives that are happening there, as well as the investments that should be, I think this week, are going to be more fully announced. And then again, we're launching a little bit of a consultation related to that, and really pulling that out in terms of what is the planning that's going on, and who are best positioned to be doing that planning, and what are those tables. And it does speak to, particularly with adult learners are complicated, they have complicated lives, and they should be incredibly, and I know many of you do and are busy doing that, supported as they've made that big step back to upgrade their skills. And so one of the things that we're wanting to get it right. So we're talking to a lot of the organizations right now, the support organizations within literacy and basic skills, Contact North being one of them, related to let's figure out how best to even convene the conversation. And so we're hoping, we're having those discussions, I think, over the next few weeks, and then hopefully in the fall. We've been told that the summer, for obvious reasons, is a hard time to bring people together, and so we're wanting to keep momentum going. So hopefully we'll be able to get as much of that planning and awareness of that planning out, so that people can do some planning for when those conversations will be happening in September and October, for that matter.
Nobody else wants in? Great. So we've got Carol over here, then the gentleman in the black T-shirt, and then Carol over here. that's a handy little thing, not just because my mother's name is Carol, but that's kind of cool. So,
Hi, my name is Carolyn Dowdell, and I'm with March of Dimes Canada Employment Services. So I wanted to first of all say how what a wonderful opportunity this is to hear from you directly about the programs and to be able to have this dialogue. So as a service provider for people with physical and various disabilities, I'm interested to know about the Support Employment Program, the pilot, and I'm wondering how will the pilot program be distinguished from ODSP employment supports, and how long will the pilot be?
So I'd like to start by clarifying something first of all. So it is not a pilot. Supported Employment Program is a phased implementation, and we're starting with 3 communities. The communities have been announced. They're working with, my staff are working with Timmins, Cornwall, and Belleville. It cuts across three ministries. So it involves MASD, Ministry of Health and Long-Term Care, and our partner ministry, Community and Social Services. And the real focus is around merging the different service offerings from those 3 ministries so that it's a coordinated approach to meeting the needs of persons with disabilities. So the communities that we're working with, we're right now in the process since the announcement doing some engagement with those communities to see if indeed they want to opt in. So we're at that particular point. Like I said, it's a phased approach. We want to start small, try this out. We're dealing with a client group that have special needs. They might have a greater need for intensive supports to help them through the process. So we're trying this out, but like I said, it's not a pilot. A pilot implies that we have an end in sight, 12 months out or whatever, and so we'll see how this goes. There's still a lot of details that need to be worked out at the community level, and that's the stage we're at between now and later on into the fall.
So I don't think I'm telling tales out of school by putting this opportunity out there. Yeah, I'll know if my colleagues start kicking me under the table in a second. But one of the things the center has been asked to do in support of the supported employment is recognizing that as the phase 1 goes out in these 3 communities, this is a model that's been used and engaged by Ontario service providers for many years now, and there's lots of really interesting, effective practices out there. And so the center's been asked to put a call out for case studies specifically for supported employment. So if there are others among you who are in that community and would like to work with us and share what you've been doing, and we'll put a full, basically, research case around it. The idea is we would have a really comprehensive view of an Ontario perspective, what's been used, what's been working, and that would then be able to inform the phase 2 of the implementation as it went forward. So.
you're almost there. 3 more feet. He'll wave at you.
All right. Guy in black t-shirt. I'm Scott. I'm with the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry, Forest Industry Division, Business Development Branch. So being government, lots of pigeonholes, but it's important to distinct that because Business Development Branch is responsible for maintaining a skilled workforce. Okay, I just usually yell, so. So anyway, my point is that I have a number of Indigenous clients. And you kind of skated over the Indigenous Initiative slide to say that there were four projects. But I'm more interested in the larger scope of what are you guys doing about Indigenous. And right now, as we speak, they're signing a letter between the Premier, the Prime Minister, and the AFN on, it's a letter of intent on common interests, and this workforce is one of the issues. So it's very timely. But the biggest barrier to all of my projects is capacity and training. And what we get when we talk with our colleagues is we get literacy, and they'll get their graduation diploma equivalency, where they need actually hard skills and in some cases very specialized skills. So if you guys could just kind of outline more specifically what you're doing about Indigenous training, I would greatly appreciate it.
So I did outline a few examples that we we're involved in right now in our northern region. They span, our efforts span, I think, the whole gamut of our employment programs and services, but with a specific focus on literacy and basic skills and apprenticeship training. And I think the one that, and I know I got introduced to Carol and she's next up with her question, but really excited about the work under a potential Skills Advance Ontario pilot that would work with the Indigenous communities in pursuing apprenticeship opportunities. I also think that we have other. It's an area that I want to pursue in terms of innovation and approaches that we take in working with Indigenous communities. I don't know if you want me to provide anything more specific than some of the examples I highlighted earlier. I'm actually lucky. I have my senior manager in Thunder Bay here and the local office manager if you wanted more details around what's happening in Thunder Bay. Or sorry, in northern region as a whole.
The other thing perhaps I'll mention is both either through the ministry or however we have more conversations about that, because I think it's important to better understand on the training side, what are the needs and barriers, and ideally we're creating a lot of consultation forums right now, and I get that, but I think the information still needs to flow. I think too, both Shelley and I, the ministry is convened a table around the Aboriginal Institutes, and there was some investments in the budget related to that, and that's been an interesting conversation in terms of it's just getting constructed now with different working tables, but the areas of training and education and skills training has started to emerge as an area of focus as well. So that's something that another possible forum, if you will, that we maybe hit the more policy making side of the equation. So hence the reason the barriers and better awareness of those, so that we can be aware of those in terms of this creation side of it.
So you're probably the one person in this room, other than my colleague Crystal, who knows of a couple of the projects that we're thinking about working in that space with. One of them is with the White Sands community in terms of looking at their short-term needs around an economic development piece that they're doing. And the other would be looking at what the ministry is doing around Shoal Lake and trying to understand and document what the practices and the effect of those practices have been. So we've taken a much more passive approach to it, in that we've been looking for opportunities where the community identified to us that there was something they were interested in, and Carol approached me earlier about getting some documentation around some of their effective practices. So much more baby steps on our end, but we're absolutely interested in being there and looking at what the opportunities are, just looking for the community a little bit to direct us and help us understand what the most productive way we can support would be.
A nice segue to our final question.
Right behind you.
Hi. I have a question. Maybe more. It's more of a statement. Who knows? We'll find out at the end. But in listening to all the presentations and and my background too, just fresh coming off from industry, where I had the opportunity to be in an environment. Excuse me, my public speaking skills are not as. But my question is, I'm glad to see. I'm very happy to see that there's an Indigenous focus to having more apprenticeships, to having more of a presence in the workforce at a skilled level rather than as a laborer level and dishwasher, and because there's a huge market out there, there's a huge employment ask, and as an Aboriginal person, and I'm a person who has been raised on the reserve, I'm a person who has taken that choice to better herself, who has risen from the social issues of her community and her people. And KCATS is a prime example of where we want to go for the future. What I'm finding is as we go forward, there's a gap. And that gap is understanding where a certain culture is coming from on both sides, not just on industry, government, and whoever else, and private sector, but there's also a gap on our side to understand where Canada is coming from, where the people of Canada are coming from, and that, what do you call it, stereotypical thinking, is that the word? So I'm wondering, has the government identified that there is a gap, and what are they doing to fix it? What are they doing to bridge it? Because in my former role, I had people coming from South Africa, Greater Toronto area, and they were trying to do business with communities who they did not understand, and they were failing because they didn't understand who they were doing business with. And on the other side, the communities didn't understand who they were doing business with. So it was my job, I just fell into it, to liaison, to bridge that gap. I was the one that brought everybody at the table to an understanding of who these people were and who these people were, so that better business could be conducted, that a relationship could be built. And it was working, And where I was the only Aboriginal manager in all of an international company. And I was like, wow, how great, yay for me, but how sad that none of my other associates, were able to take advantage of that because of that gap that existed between the two cultures. Like, we want to be a viable contribution to the fabric of Canada. This is our country too. This is where we live. We're not going anywhere. You guys are not going anywhere. And there's nothing wrong with that. We need to come together so that we can make what everybody says in their statements, up there real, not just fluff. I've been around for a while. And I've started from the bottom. And I've worked my way up, and I'm in a position now where I have a voice, where I want to see somebody in his department over there in the Ministry of Forestry, and I want to know why there isn't anybody there. So that's why I'm going to be contacting your offices to make sure that we find a way to bridge those gaps. So maybe there, I think I did make a statement. Thank you.
So does anybody want to address the question of bridging, cultural gaps, translation, even translation from Toronto to Thunder Bay?
Well, I guess I would say I would welcome the conversation, I guess, in terms of, so let's do connect, and I think we can always try to better understand what the barriers are, and I think there are, again, there are various tables, but let's see if those are going to work, or if we need to convene a different type of conversation. I would say we'll figure that out together.
The one thing I would add to that is just recently having participated in some training that really, and I'll be honest, it was Indigenous focused training, and it was around the history, and it involved colonization and the impacts of that, et cetera, et cetera. Extremely high quality training, and before I went into that training, I thought I was pretty savvy when it came to Canada's history and who we are and what, how we got to where we are today. And I can tell you, after completing the training, I was astounded by how little I really did know about our past, about our history, you know, and the impacts of what's happened in our country. So it just, you know, I think that training has the potential to be rolled out, I think, across our entire ministry. And I think I'm going to be a loud proponent for it, because for me, it was absolutely eye-opening.
Thank you very much for your question and bringing it to our attention. And I just wanted to say that I believe there's a role for the Local Employment Planning Council to play within that. Again, it's hard to get all of the people together in one room and ask the questions, and someone taking notes and that kind of thing. So we have been starting to we have been starting those conversations. And I have to apologize to Colin. He's sitting at your table. And I was kind of giving him grief over the last week. Have you been able to invite those employment and community coordinators yet? And I hadn't heard from him, and I'm going, I really want to meet these people. And so we wanted to, first of all, get to meet you, and then, but as a local employment planning council and working with Matawa First Nations, we did want to start those conversations, because up until the point of having more resources as the local employment planning council, we really didn't have the opportunity or the resources to take us into your communities or to have you come to ours. So, so I think there is a role that we can play, and I look forward to that.
Sorry, I just forgot to mention what I do and who I work for. My name is Carol Achnevan-Escom. I am the executive director for KCATS. So I will, you know, be very active in speaking to, you know, the community as a whole, and to see what we can do together. That's the key word there. We are a community, and I believe in partnership, and there's no time like now to start mending bridges and moving forward, so you'll be hearing from me in a good way. Thank you.
Okay, so before I turn the microphone over to Mads to offer her closing remarks, I just wanted to thank the panelists for being willing to sit here and answer all of our questions as best they could, carefully at times, but that's to be expected in a public environment. But thank you very much. Over to you, man.
Thank you, Charles. I was a little nervous after I asked Charles. I'm thinking, okay, what kind of questions is he getting together for us? But thank you very much. You gave me a break today. I forgot my notes. But just very quickly, because I don't want to be the person that's between you and lunch, I did want to thank a number of people individually, and all of you really. Wanted to acknowledge Carrie Chipetta Consulting. Thank you very much for helping us pull all of this together today. I really want to, I'd like to ask you to help me thank the Victoria Inn and their staff for looking after us so well today. And I'd certainly like to, again, thank you to the three presenters. When I first met the three of them and had an opportunity to speak with them in Toronto, I thought, man, now these are three very genuine, approachable, and remarkable women, and so it was a pleasure to bring you to Thunder Bay and introduce them to you. And thank you so much for all being here to be a part of today. You took time out of your busy schedule, and I know how busy it can truly be, so thank you so much. I also want to thank my local employment planning council team. You put up with me on a day-to-day basis, and we've been riding this whirlwind of what the LEPC is for a number of months, and we're all still here. So that's great.